Hello, everybody. Good evening. Thank y'all for tuning in. I'm Reginald Titus Jr. with Grind Over Matter Foundation. Today we have a special guest, Prince Baggett. Welcome, man.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yes, sir. Thank you for your time. Anybody, if this is your first time on here, we're about, representation in front of and behind the camera, and how you can support that is by going to grindovermatter.org. You can donate. If you have any ideas for film projects, or if you want to come and work on some of our film projects or donate for our workshops, that will help us out a lot. Just go to grindovermatter.org, hit that donate button, or you can reach us at info@grindovermatter.org. And again, it's about having representation in front of and behind the camera. We're going to show you how to do that. But first, let's get into the bio of Prince. Hold on one moment. Here we go. All right. So, Prince Baggett is a dynamic C-level entertainment executive with over 19 years of experience driving innovative storytelling, brand management, and multi-platform revenue strategies. As a partner of the GrindHouse Incorporated, he leads a 25-member team to deliver scripted, non-scripted, and branded content, generating over $5 million annually while forging partnerships with brands like Comcast, Sprite, and Jeep. A passionate advocate for diverse voices, Prince integrates emerging technologies to captivate younger generations and reshape cultural narratives. Previously, as president of film and interim head of TV at Confluential Films and Black Love, Prince was instrumental in helping to build the company from startup. He played a key role in developing and financing acclaimed projects, including the Emmy-winning documentary Going to Mars, the Nikki Giovanni Project, HBO Max, Fancy Dance, Apple Plus, and Young Wild Free. Collaborated with talented teams to where they secured $150 million from Goldman Sachs to bring diverse, creator-led stories to life. Before that, as president of motion picture and head of development and production at Genius Production, which is Marseille Martin's company, he negotiated a first look deal with Universal Pictures and oversaw a slate of youth-focused hits like Little and Fantasy Football at Paramount Plus. And also, he set up 6 other films at Universal Pictures. Prince's career also includes early roles at Paramount Pictures and CBS Studios, where he produced the Cannes short 379, and there's ongoing consulting. Recognized by Business Insider as one of the top 25 rising stars in entertainment and featured in Forbes, he co founded the Diverse Representation Black Entertainment Executives Pipeline and mentors emerging talent. Through programs like We Screenplay Diverse Voices and Film Independent, Prince continues to transform the industry through strategic leadership and groundbreaking content. Hey, man, you've been busy.
You know, for 19 years. You should be. you know.
Yes, sir. Yeah, man, that's impressive. Um, let's let what we do here. We jump right into it, right? So tell us what's a C-level executive, and what exactly does that mean? And then what's the pathway to becoming a C-level executive?
So mainly, especially from the creative side, it's really having chief authority to be able to make decisions when it came to projects. Whether you're paying for people's scripts, paying for development, financing, or they're just going to move forward in developing a project that you want to set up with a studio, or whatever path forward ultimately that you see as the best route to be able to ultimately get something made, right? In a system that making anything is obviously a huge blessing, but it's really being able to oversee the process and understand the financial aspects of that, and also mandates, right? Like, who are we selling it to? What does this project look like? What are the studios of? And being able to make a calculated decision that ultimately sets up, the project, the creator, and the company in the best opportunity to win.
And becoming a C-level executive, what's the pathway for somebody that's like, say they're just now graduating high school? What's the right college, right? Or is there a right college? Should they go to college? What is your thought process behind that? And then after that, what should they do next as far as developing into a C-level executive?
So I don't know if there's a right path, but I will share my path. Because I feel like there's so many execs in our business that have taken different paths. And, when we all talk, we all come from different places. But for me, I started as an intern at Paramount Pictures back right out of school as an intern, and then became executive assistant to the president of the studio at the time. And I know that was something that a lot of people dread. I dreaded it coming in. I was like, wow, I got a degree and, my master's. I should already be making this type of money with this type of job, right? But
Yes.
but it's so much you learn along the path and so much talent you get to work with at that stop. Then I became Then I worked at director of development, moved up to VP of development, and ultimately we went through a big shift in our business with the writer's strike, the previous one to the last one,
Mm-hmm.
where ultimately that's when unscripted took off, right? That's when Flavor Flav and Housewives and all these traditional linear cable stations that didn't, that did decently okay in ratings really took off because they can now make something at a price that ultimately garnered a lot of viewers, right? So VH1, MTV, everybody was kind of Bravo, Oxygen, E at the time. A lot of places were doing so well at that period. So after that, I worked on Lamar Odom's book deal. I did a deal for his book Darkness to Light. I oversaw every part of the process, from distribution to marketing to the writer deal to the publishing deal. So I got to do that. And then after I wrapped that, I got called from one of the lawyers. At one point, I worked on a show with Debbie Allen and her husband. And the same lawyer called me and said, this young girl named Marcy Martin wants to create a production company. So I ended up sitting down with them. She had so many ideas, so many thoughts. Obviously, one of the big ones that everybody knows was Little. It wasn't the only one, but Little that we ended up making with Will Packer and Kenya Barris at Universal Pictures, starring Issa Rae and Regina Hall alongside Marseille. It was one of the first projects out the gate that we did. And after that, then I became president of film for Confidential Films Black Love. And that was my journey. And it took time because the main thing that really, created excitement from the studio was really starting with Marseille. Because we started with a kernel and turned that into something that a lot of people started recognizing and a lot of people started having conversations about throughout the industry. And because our industry is so system forward, meaning if you're not in the studio system, if you don't have certain visibility, it's hard to get meetings. It's hard to get the high level things that it takes to sometimes get things made in quote unquote Hollywood. So that allowed me to really branch out and be able to do amazing things. But that's what got me there, was really building something, starting from scratch and believing in something before it became anything. And that turned into something huge. But some execs ride the studio train for a long time, jump studios, become, director, VP, SVP in the system. Then all of a sudden they're able to run a place, as we've seen with a lot of execs that have rose to the higher ranks.
So your pathway, did you, when you were in college, because you mentioned you got a master's and everything, did you study film or were you more focused on the business side? What was your pathway that way before you became an intern?
So my goal at the time when I went to school, I literally just have a business degree. So I had no insights on television or film at all. And when I came in and I got the internship, which was so big, I think it shows the importance of internships. Because when I got the internship at Paramount Pictures, that's where I learned about barter deals and time syndication. It's stuff that's not talked about that much no more. But when I came into the business, it was like the Entertainment Tonight insider things meant a lot. And Judge Judy and Montel Williams. And as you know, Paramount at the time had all those labels, including Oprah, right? Even though she kind of ran her own shop and worked the way she wanted to. So even when we split to become CBS, that really gave me all the info I needed. I took it all in. And because I took it in, I started seeing how people operated and what we were buying and what we were doing. And all my insights on the film and TV side really came from that. But my business acumen came from getting that degree in business. And that allowed me to bring the business and the creative together in a real way.
What was that? What do you think for like people that are listening, and anybody that's listening, make sure, comment. You have any questions, you can tap them in and you can chime in. But you go from like, hey man, I'm graduated, I should get this job, I should be right here. So it seems like the industry, hey man, you got to learn from the ground up, even though you've gotten all these credentials. They make it to where you have to learn from the ground up. How important is that? And then what does your attitude have to be, for the younger people that be watching?
That look, I feel like when I came into the business, this is me being transparent and honest, right? We had a lot of gatekeepers when I came into the business. It was hard. They went through it. They had a hard time. And for people of color, there wasn't that many. I mean, you guys probably know them on top of your head, but there wasn't that many people of color really with production companies. There was really only a couple, a few. And it was so tough for them to make it that when they finally did, it's like, well, everybody needs to work like this. I'll say this. And then on my side, what I got to see was, especially coming up the other corporate side at a Paramount Pictures and at those people, I saw a lot of legacy kids and opportunity kids in the system get a lot of opportunity. I didn't come from, when I came to this business, I saw very few people of my color in this business. It was very, even being in as an intern, I was like, wow, like you're moving up all these stairs, you know, you're setting up meetings all throughout the research, finance, all these different divisions and departments in these big corporations, and you don't see that many of us. And you always figure like, is there a real lane for me to get there? That's what I thought at that time for sure. Obviously now we've seen a big growth and a big growth of Black production companies and more Black executives or more people of color executives in different roles. But that's what I saw coming into it. So for me, it was always a part of like, I was gonna have to work harder than everybody else. I knew that off top. I was there early. At the time, Nielsen ratings meant everything right, making sure all the execs had Nielsen ratings at the bottom of their desk, go get their food from the water tower, right? At Paramount time, make sure that we had our fridge filled. And at the same time I was able to do that, I became friends with the security guards in the front. So one story I always tell people is really to grind up, but it's also not to get the people at those relationships that you see at maybe lower level that aren't lower level relationships. Because what security guard gave me, we became friends. I was sending them pizzas. They would allow me to go into any stages. So I became friends with showrunners and talent. And for a lot of them, especially at the time, there was a showrunner named Yanetta Boone who was running one-on-one, and that had Flex Alexander, Robert Richard, Kyla Pratt at the time. And I became best friends with almost everybody in the cast because for them, that hardly saw a Black person come from the corporate side of the offices over, I meant a lot to that studio. And now one of the PAs that were on there, that was her or nephew. He's a showrunner we're just a showrunner for The Chi and Justin Ilian, and ultimately has now showrun a whole lot of shows. So to see our rise from the bottom to be, well, in regards to the hierarchy, to be able to make it in a place to where to be respecting the system and get those opportunities is really huge.
Man, that's cool. Maya, she says she's listening from the Philippines, and they have the kind of like the same issues going on, but instead of color, it's kind of dealing more with like region.
And we deal with a little bit of that too. But yeah, the color thing back then was very much, it was a huge gap.
Man,
it still is, but back then it was a ridiculous huge gap.
Yeah, get people used to seeing us around. Okay.
Yeah, when you see one person, you're like, you want to, hey, what do you do?
Yeah.
Who are you?
For real, that's crazy. So as a partner, you're a partner at the GrindHouse Incorporated. What does that mean? You know, you're a partner at the GrindHouse Incorporated. What is your day-to-day activities, and what does that
So
entail?
one of the big pieces, a lot of people ask this down, they're like, Prince, what are you like what are you up to? So this is the thing. I, as the business continues to evolve the whole night, I love film and TV, and something I always do, and I'm touching a lot of umbrella by working some stuff with Comcast now and Disney as we speak. But the big opportunity for me is also with companies that feel more evergreen, meaning that they touch other spaces, touching brands, live events, things where you could connect storytelling in so many different ways. And now with storytelling growing into digital and obviously with YouTube breaking records and streaming online and the creator universe growing, I love that. So as a partner, I'm able to oversee a lot of the processes in regards to what are we doing, not just here in the States, but around the world, but also bigger stakes coming that I can't talk about too much right now, which is way more about building systems and structures that ultimately does allow us to continue to build our own studios in a big, massive way that also helps the economic development of different places, but still being able to influence Hollywood in a real way with the relationships that I built over those 19 years at the highest level. So it's really about creating an ecosystem now for me that's way bigger than just project by project, but how do you create something that has a little more evergreen life to it and sustainability in a business that we see is consistently evolving. And, as we see now, all these changes and the stuff being talked about, I know that one thing that I have to always do is be able to move with the times and be adaptable to them.
Can you talk a little bit more about the GrindHouse? Is it a collective of people? Kind of illustrate more what you do with that
So the
organization.
GrindHouse by nature, it's a production company. It's a full creative, I'm gonna call it more of a creative studio. It does everything from end to end. So we own our own equipment. We have our own cameras. We just shot stuff for the advertising campaign when it came to the past election. We did things in the state from university, get out the vote events to ultimately creating ads, right? So everything in between. But we've also created films and we've also created TV shows. And we also do like everything in between to ultimately be able to put the company in the best position to win when it comes to events, helping people develop projects, helping us shoot reels or whatever we need to do to be able to continue to create content and storytell in whatever mediums that apply. So yes, we have 4 companies. We have about 25 employees and growing. And ultimately, we're based out of Philly. I'm out of LA. I've been out of LA my whole career, but I'm kind of moving some stuff around with some of the bigger teams that I'm talking about.
Okay. So you've been instrumental in creating production companies from scratch. So let's dive into a couple of those production companies. Let's start with Marseille's company. It's called Genius, right? Is that the name of the production company?
Genius Productions, yes.
Walk us through that. Like, walk us from like you, this production company doesn't exist. All of a sudden, you getting introduced, and then how you get involved into how y'all developing things. How's that happen?
Well, this started with the genius, Marseille having an idea, right? And she had the idea of doing the opposite of big with little. And one of the big pieces of it that created some opportunity and landscape was, she's on Blacklist. She has a relationship with Kenya Barris, right? Kenya Barris ended up sharing that obviously with Will Packer, and it brought everybody together. Will Packer. So to make it all work, right at the time, Kenya wasn't huge in film, so to speak, right? He was huge in television, and Will Packer obviously had the big Universal Pictures deal to be able to create films. One of the few at the time people of color that really had studio deals to be able to go through. That partnership allowed us to obviously make the film Little. And with Little, because so much was going on at the same time, me and her father was out talking to another studio, but ultimately we ended up making the deal for a first look deal with Universal Pictures, where we then set about 6 to 8 other films. And with the first look, that's able to cover some overhead, able to cover some development costs, including office space, executive fees, some other pieces of that. And ultimately, we were able to continue to grow the brand. At the time, we were very boutique. Before we had like the big managers and the big agencies coming in, we kind of worked to be able to work that. And I'll say one other thing, even when we got the deal, initially the agents are like, guys, slow down. You're moving too fast. This isn't how it works. Wait a couple of years. You guys need to make more content. But ultimately, Marseille had a very clear brand, and we were able to use that. And ultimately, when the deal landed, it happened to be like, oh, wow, this is record breaking. And Marseille became the youngest talent ever with a motion picture deal, and the youngest one ever to be a producer of a major studio film. So this ended up being a huge win all the way through and through. And that allowed us to get, number one, be part of the system, but also talk with some of the other bigger talents and producers in our business to ultimately set up more projects around town and be able to make more content. So we made shows with Quibi that never came out. Obviously, Quibi didn't last long. It was
Quibi was the short vertical ones, right? The
short vertical, yes, the short vertical content space. And then we were working on this other show with Marseille with Freeform that landed, but then we also ended up with Saturdays at Disney and fantasy football that we partnered with Spring Hill and Jamal and LeBron and them on over there, and so many things. We've been working on developing some projects with Kevin Hart with Marseille. So we had so much going on that was just so cool.
So I want to get into a little bit of the details if we can about just that project. So that was like kind of like more of a macro, but okay. So y'all talk about the project. Is the script already completed? Is like the script done? Okay, so where do you go from, okay, we had this conversation, we have ideas. How do we go with you involved? How do we get this script developed, and how long does that take?
So a lot of times it turns to what we call it in our business sometimes, and it just depends on who the writer is and who the person attached to it is. But we make it a bake-off, generally speaking. Bake-off meaning that we go out to agents, managers, what writers are available with some level of film experience that ultimately like this idea or this concept, the story that we might have fleshed out as a one-pager, right, that people would like. Ultimately, that happened first. Right out the gate after Will Packer came onto the project. At that point, him and James Lopez, right? James Lopez was over at Macro now, but he was over at Will Packer at that time. And they've obviously James and Will made a lot of films together during that tenure in the comedy space. So from there, brought on the writer, and then the writer put the script. Universal kind of pushed it that they wanted to get this film made and get it done, because obviously, as we all know, the whole time Marseille's getting older, she's gonna age out.
You gotta hurry up, like the Harry Potter kids.
Especially when you're working with young folk, because they're aging right in front of you. So about 3 years later, they greenlit the script from Tina Gordon, and ultimately we were able to make the script. Kenya Barris did some editing also within the confines of the script, and then ultimately we were able to get this film made. So it took about 3 or 4 years from the development process to get it made.
Okay, so during this development process, for people that are into the details, are checks being cut, or are people doing this in hopes that it'll get financed? Are you finding financing so that you can pay the writer to develop it? Like, what does that look like?
So that's what helps so much when you set up with the studio. So Will Packer having that deal with Universal allows the writer to get paid to do the work. We believe in the writer's vision. Normally, the writer is pitching us how they see the film. From that pitch, we take that pitch into the studio with us as producers around it, supporting, believing in this vision that this writer shared with us. And in this case, the studio paid for that. It could be an investor sometimes. It could be the production company if they have an investor and have their own financials. But in this case, Will Packer had the deal with Universal. Universal said yes. Ultimately, they're the ones paying for the script. So ultimately, it goes right into them. And at that point, the only ones that are actually getting paid are the writers. No other producers get paid until the project is greenlit, which is why, meaning that it's ready to go into production, or into pre-production, of course. And up until then, that's why having a first look or overall deal is so helpful, because it helps to cover some of those fees and expenses that keeps your business running while you're going through the development process of getting of hopefully getting a script ready to go that could be greenlit by a studio or by any investor or financier that's willing to take it on.
And you said you called that a bake-off? Is that what you called it?
We call it a bake-off whenever we go out to multiple writers with a project.
Okay.
Depending on the writer's level, sometimes, you got to go out exclusively if you want to go out to some of the big names, right? Like if you want to go out to Kugler to write something, he's not going to be a part of your bake-off. So if you're not going exclusively to him, you've already lost in a big way to certain names in this business that have wrote a lot of projects, because their names alone help to greenlight it. We have writers that a lot of people might not know their names in the system, like that have the writers credibility of a Kugler, but that ultimately can help get your project through just because their name is attached and they wrote amazing work. So, but when it's not, we do a bake-off just for the part of like, everybody's really good here, and they can be really great writers. Don't get it wrong. They're still great writers all doing a bake-off. But the difference to a bake-off is we might also be looking for the right version of the pitch. Because again, 3 writers are going to have 3 different pitches and 3 different ways of seeing a movie. And sometimes you're looking for what's the best thing that's going to work within what we want and what we feel like we want to provide for the studio.
Okay. And then, and you had mentioned first look deal. So to the people that don't understand what exactly that means, what exactly is a first look deal? And then how does that help you in this development process?
So a first look deal is a deal that a studio makes with either a producer, a writer, or a talent that allows them to have the right of first refusal for any ideas and projects that you come up with or anything that comes through your space. So what a first look allows you to do is be like, okay, we'll pay you for these deals initially, right? Just for you to bring it to us first. If we refuse, you could take it out anywhere you want in the landscape. You can sell it anywhere else, but we have the right first. So whatever you have comes to us first is really the deal on that. They want to make sure that they're not missing nothing first. And if they don't want it, you can go out and sell to whoever you want it to. And on the studio side, they pay a little bit of money for that because now you have a deal there. They're not prioritizing you as somebody that has a deal with the studio. Plus, obviously, you get a little bit of money to be able to pay your team and some overhead and some development fees if you decide. That allows you to run a business while you have a deal with the studio.
Okay. And then that was the first look deal with this production. That was with Will Packer. And so was that what you were saying?
Yes, initially it was with Will Packer. And then obviously we ended up with our own first look deal.
Yeah, congrats on that, man. Yeah. And then you get it produced. So what does that look like? Okay, you greenlit, y'all have the money, the production budget, right? What does that process look like going into pre-production and getting ready?
It moved pretty quickly at that point. I mean, at that point, once the studio said yes, then that means the funds start getting distributed and you can start going to go out to make the film. And I'll say, generally speaking, at that point, it's under the director's vision, right? Like a producer gets up to a certain piece, really. I mean, we're a part of the whole process. So as an executive, and I want to make sure that I outline this too, just because it goes into my job in a real way. Executives in some ways have always operated as a producer in some type of way. And when I say that, it means you're taking a kernel of the idea, whether it's a treatment, a script, whether it's an idea of an article that somebody finds online or a book, some type of IP, right? And your job is to oversee the process from the beginning to turn it into something that ultimately could get made by the studio. That's most general execs in the development production business oversee things early on in the process. There's some people that just do production. There's some people that just do development. Execs, my job was to oversee things from beginning to end, right, of the process, and work the deals in between, attach, get the right casting people, get the right directors, make sure that we're bringing on the right writers, right, when it's other steps to the process and everything. So let me say that when you get into production, when we decide that we're going with a director that we believe that could deliver this script, that the studio is also approving, right? This is all hand in hand, because director also got to give a vision, right? They got to also figure out what's the tone and mood. How are they going to shoot this film? What is their creative, what is their creative vision that's going to bring this to life and give us the best version that is going to be that would resonate with an audience, right? So for us, once it goes to a director's hand, obviously they start hiring their department heads, start putting together a team, of course, working hand in hand with us producers, and ultimately a couple months later, out of pre-production, when we decide the location and that we're locked in on the script and this is the budget, this is going to be our cast, then we'll be good to go. And literally at that point, as producer, our job is, and executives, our job is only to support that director.
Man, that's pretty cool. And then how long was y'all's production process? So once you got greenlit, what was that production schedule?
It went pretty much quick. What was that? Oh my God, so many years ago now. So it went from, what did we start? March, April, and then we shot it over the summer. Like it was like a June and July. It was pretty much like a probably a 45-day shoot, I think, total 45 to 60-day shoot.
Wow.
Yeah, and it was all based on Million Talent Together. We shot it in Atlanta at Tyler Perry Studios, and it moved quick from there.
So that kind of goes to show you, everybody that's listening in, that 2 years of development, right, or 2 to 3 years getting everything together, working the deals, getting it written, and then 45 days in Georgia.
Let me tell you, it's literally that. I mean, and just to keep people with like some type of system, like most execs we talk about all the time. I think Brian Smiley, that was at Heartbeat, they just one of their projects just went through. It was 4 years of development. It just sold and got greenlit today, right? So
Wow.
the process of development, a process to see things through from a studio system that people I think sometimes forget is, even when the studio says we like this script and we want to figure it out, there's still a lot of steps with that before most films get greenlit. So most films take about 4 to 5 years if the studio wants to make it. Again, in reality, most scripts die in the back of those systems, in the back of those studio halls is where really most of them.
Right. Okay. Is there also, you had mentioned Black Love with Confluential Films.
Yeah.
That was also another production company that you started from scratch. Can you walk us kind of through how that happened and what way did that end up going?
But they were growing because they had just during that time that I was coming in, they were shooting The Perfect Fine. They were already shooting it. It was a movie with Netflix with Gab Union and talent named Keith Powers. And they were growing and building now, and with the potential of new startup funds and stuff coming in that allowed them to really be able to expand out. So coming in is almost the same process. And I'm going to say this in reality, because people see a lot of projects get made, but behind the scenes, it's way bigger than just a project. It's a deal that you're doing in the system of it all. It's getting the agents. It's setting up the brand to be able to be discovered, where the people know who you are in the system, so that they believe in what you're doing and will actually finance it and believe that you're not a risk to the millions and millions of dollars they're about to give you to do a project. So with The Perfect Fine, we partnered with AGC Studios at that time. Again, that was right prior to my time, but coming into it, now a few months later, we ended up becoming financiers, ended up raising from a company standpoint $150 million to Goldman Sachs. We financed films like Apple Dance, Fancy Dance, that's at Apple, Young Wild Free, that was at BET Plus with Sanaa Lathan and Algie Smith, and also Going to Mars that Nikki Giovanni doc. But at the same time, Black Love is a media company, right? It started with the Black Love that they shot themselves. That was a big success on OWN, and turned that into a place that did events and all type of other media stuff, podcasts and different things that they're still doing, working with brands and all the pieces. And we also I threw our first ABFF Black Love Confluential party at ABFF, which happened to be a huge success, and also partnered with quite a few brands there as well. So I'll say this, when it comes to building out the brand in the system and letting people know you exist, that's a big part of it. From the studio lens, again, a lot of people could create independence and do different things, but to be recognized by the Universal Pictures, the Netflixes, the Amazon, that's a different level of visibility.
Right. And
And that's what we had
um
to grow into.
wow. In dealing with that particular piece with Black Love, because it was a wasn't it like a documentary first and it kind of turned into a series? Was
It was
that
a
the
docu-series on OWN first.
okay.
And it was very successful, right? And I tell people timing is everything because it was after the writer's strike. OWN had just started, building up. And, when you think about programming as a whole, it's also an unscripted docu-series that only two people in the company were the ones that were doing full production. So you could imagine they kept the cost very low for it to be a success.
That's pretty cool. So that kind of leads into like kind of talking about the different levels of productions, because you have projects that are 5 million and under. You got the $50 million, then you got like the tent pole productions, and then you got like just the straight up micro where it's just thousands of dollars. What a lot of independent filmmakers are familiar with. Can you kind of walk us through like kind of the different levels and what's a win for a studio for this level? What's a win for a studio at this next level? And what's a win and what's the possible business model for these different levels?
Studios as a whole are very difficult because, you know, there was a few, talent in our business. I feel like you can make a film for $2 million, $5 million, and they don't understand why studios don't make those films. And generally speaking, I'm saying general because we know horror at 5 million with a great concept that don't have to be character driven can make a lot of money. We saw that with Get Out, right? And everybody uses Get Out now as the bar, but yet we haven't seen it for over a decade, right? It's been over almost almost a decade and a half. We haven't found another Get Out. But you can still make it at a price to make a solid dollar with a horror thing that people believe. But generally speaking, for a studio, what people, this is the business side mixed with the creative, which is, they have $1 billion overhead. Most of the studios, if they're not there, they're at about 500 million to $1 billion overhead, and they have to make films that take risks on every day. Most studios, take the Universal Pictures, they got to take the big swing. They need people to come out, watch, be excited, evented, Wicked, right? Or Barbie for one. Like the big wins that you're going to see on the bottom of the statements are the big films that are eventized. So while they can make a lot of $5 million films and they can maybe make $10 million on it, at the end of the day, by the end of the year, the studio is broke and that profit statement looks really bad because they made these cheap films that made the type of money, but now you got to pay for all these people. They want to make things that could get to $1 billion, that could get to $500 million in numbers, and that's the separation between small films and big films. So, but yet, and a lot of studios will say this to indie filmmakers, just because it's smaller doesn't mean it's not going to be successful. It just doesn't work for that business model, right? That's a very specific business model. They need to make a certain amount of money. They have overhead. If you only have 2 employees, me taking that same risk looks different, right? If I don't have a whole amusement park employees and risk and paying lawsuits and all type of stuff, it's a different lens. So like, for instance, like there's certain films that you can make more indie. Like just say Cord Jefferson's American Fiction, that they did do an indie type route, even though they got distribution with Alana over at Orion Pictures under the Amazon label, but still in the independent sector of it. That's a win. That's a win in there, right? You made it for what, 5-6 million. It did probably 25 million total. Great win. Everybody wins. The smaller studios get to go home with a few $1 million. Everybody's happy, right? For me, if I had my own studio and I did 3-4 million and I get to take that home, it's a big win for me, right?
Right. Yeah.
For Universal, they'll be out of business tomorrow, right? Like,
they can't do that. They can't.
People will have to get fired. All the way down to like nobody working there. So it's really about being smart about where that lands. Now, while I say that, there's places that do a little more indie films that have distribution, right? A24, Neon. They do certain level of indie films that have a certain level of distribution that, generally speaking, they make things at a certain price. They play with the system of the theatrical market as well as other opportunities when it comes to streaming. One movie that did well for them is the Hand one. I forgot what it's called. The horror Hand movie
horror
that
film. I remember that
Netflix acquired at Sundance. And talk to me. So like films like that, ultimately you could get paths for, but just knowing who's in it, who's driving it, what's the genre, all these business decisions is a part of how it fits in the marketplace. So I always say it's project by project, but once somebody tells me what's a part of that project, I know where it lands or I know where it fits in the marketplace.
Okay. And then and they're in like A24, Neon, and company and Blumhouse, stuff like that. That's what, like maybe like 5 million, 10 million. What do you think their budgets are kind of looking like?
It's going up a lot because now they try to drive higher. So first, Blumhouse has a big deal with Universal. Remember, Blumhouse has one of the few richest deals, and one of their deal in our business is crazy. That's why they just made what Freddy's. I think what was that, 20 million, 25 million.
Yeah.
Blumhouse used to keep it all under 10 million when they got started. All great concepts. That's how they built this horror, the horror brand, by just making great, smart, elevated horror that drove people to watch it. But A24 and Neon have their own distribution model, meaning that they made deals with theaters to be able to drive it in the
So it's a little different because that Blumhouse is going through Universal. So it's still basically Universal in a way. And then with A24, they're doing their own distribution directly with the exhibitors.
Yeah. So if they do it, they're no different. Like when we talk studios, sometimes people call a lot of people studios. Studios are people that can pay it and get it out there, right? And again, distribution is sometimes parts that other places have to add. But when a studio has distribution aligned with it, that's a big win. When you have someone that can market it and actually put it in theaters or put it in some place that people will actually see it.
Wow. Okay. And then what's the next level? Is there a level under that? Is there like I was talking about the like micro, which is basically thousands of dollars, but is there another level before we get to the micro budget stuff?
I think everything else falls underneath that level. I mean, anything under 5 mil, I mean, it's really a small film.
Right. Absolutely.
And from a system standpoint, it's a really hard space because generally speaking, anything that falls below that number is not genre. It's typically dramas, and dramas from a system standpoint is very hard to eventize, to get a lot of people to just go out and watch it in droves. You're gonna take your family there on Friday night, right? That's just doesn't really happen unless you have a big talent, and those big talent budgets eventize those dramas. So the tier below that, it becomes more of a distribution model. It becomes like, can we make it? How do we make this the best version that thing could potentially be, and sell it and distribute it? As we all know, the distribution routes to all films is just how great can you make something to get a return on that investment. So, but that level generally doesn't really play in the system in the same way, but it does play where a studio might acquire it if it's done at a high level.
Yeah. Kind of more like, I guess it would be like kind of like almost what like direct to video was back in the day,
Same thing for sure, right? Amazon will pick up a lot of content, as you see on there. Everything's not the greatest videos on earth on there, so there's always a route to sell. Is it a route for you to be able to get your money back on what was invested?
Yeah, man, well done. Okay. So these days, what do you talk to all kinds of people, they have questions and things like that. What do you recommend? What's the landscape now? And then what do you recommend they form their business model after based on this landscape?
The landscape is tough because, the business is consolidating quite a bit, right? We have more tech companies that got more money than ever that are buying content, but then what are they actually buying, right? And then it becomes these big packages, right? We need big talent. Who's the director? Who's the like, how do we drive this in the marketplace? Hey, young people are on TikTok now. So who's actually watching this instead of who's gonna actually go see this project, and is it worth our cash? I think from a market standpoint, from a selling standpoint, packages have become the strongest thing. It's way hard to sell something on concept now. You can't walk into a studio and be like, I got a great concept, let's do it. Now, if you have a great concept and you have Coogler attached, or Christopher Nolan, or Spielberg, or Denis Villeneuve, of course, yes, the studios are willing to hedge their bets. A lot of people said, even with Sinners, Ryan Coogler's film, like they're like, wow, we thought studios weren't buying originals. They weren't buying originals, but they're gonna buy it from the right people, right? Who's bringing this to us, and what's the package, right? Also had an A-list with Michael B. Jordan, obviously attached to it. So packaging and understanding the business of that is very important. If you could package, it's how do we create the smartest package to win? That's really where it comes from. And the more that you could package, and the more that you could prove it, and the more you could write it out and draw out what this feels like and how it could fit in today's world, I think is important.
Okay.
So it's all understanding mandates, right? It's like we all know horror works, but you just can't do a horror where people are just cutting off people's head. What are you saying What's the why now? What are you saying to the
I,
world? Other
yeah.
things matter.
I ain't gonna lie. I just me and my wife we went to a theater. We went to watch a movie. Actually on Mother's Day to watch Center. But there was a I ain't gonna say what movie it is, but literally the trailer is somebody dying. That's and it's a horror movie that's coming out. It's literally a graphic of somebody dying. There's no story attached. The dude just dies. They're getting away with it. Uh,
and,
uh,
and the other thing I want people to be careful of too, like, is like, because there's not always be like people like, well, they did it. I'm like, just keep in mind, there's one off, but don't make the anomaly the rule. And it's okay for you to make it. Just know what you're coming into is what I say. Just understand the business behind the business.
right, and that one in particular was a franchise, so they already
Yeah.
had some.
There we go. There we go.
Quick question. Is this Fortress Dance Theater, Ohio here looking to transition to dance filmmaking, create story-driven dance for film instead of the stage? I guess they're kind of looking for maybe some insight as a choreographer with little experience in film media besides social media videos. What would you recommend I focus on learning first? That. What do you think, Prince?
But was that a film? That was asking about film though, right?
Yeah, I guess they're getting started and they're a choreographer. Is there a way for them, I guess, being a choreographer, so they have that background? Is there a way they can kind of use their skill set to get into, maybe a studio system, maybe a production company? Well, what are your thoughts there?
I think the main thing is just understanding what you want to make and exactly what you want to do. So is that like writing a script? Is that like what other elements of it? Is the choreography within it? I'll say this when it comes to our jobs as a whole, from the studio side all the way down to everybody else. It's in the day it's about storytelling. No matter what we're doing in these conversations. So like, if you want to do a film, it's coming up with a compelling 3-act. People buy into things that can sell. Let me tell you, no matter who it's coming from, it's just how do you create something that feels fresh and new in the marketplace while still being able to give those comps that allow us to be able to see like, wow, the vision for this film is clear on how we can make money off of the idea. So I think it's hard for me to say the choreography aspect of that. But if you want to move into it, it's really about, okay, how do you tell a great story? And if it's a film within that 3-act structure of what's that inciting incident? What journey are we going on? And how do we wrap that film up? And how do we resolve that conflict and grow the characters all within the context of this film, but also eventized in a way that could work. So I'll say this, just as a whole, I tell a lot of people that, especially when they bring me different ideas, is because people say, man, I got this dark drama that I want to do, this and that. I'm like, okay, this would be tough in film, but also think about other genres. Like there's ways to subvert the message that people want to send in other genres. A lot of times people see it as just like the past, we just grew up in the hood, this and that. How can you say that in a way that's fun instead of just the same stories, same proverbial stories? So whether you're a choreographer or a dancer, or it's all about telling stories. So if you can tell a story that's in that space that feels fresh and that feels, like something that should be a movie or something that you feel like a lot of people might be interested to see, then you got to build out a story that works and start there.
I appreciate that advice. Fortress Dance Theater. Yeah, get to working on that great story. You said, if it's good and it's solid, people buy no matter who it's coming from if it's solid.
They definitely will.
AD asks, what projects are you currently looking to develop?
That's a good question because a lot of times I get asked this a lot. I've kind of stepped away from development a little bit to build a much larger entity that I'm doing. But I will say this: I am touching a few big things that I am working on, which I think for me, sci-fi, that people have IP. I'm gonna say IP behind. Generally speaking, I'll say in this industry, it's almost impossible to sell a sci-fi world without intellectual property, because what people lose when they do sci-fi is rules of the world, the magic. Superman that can't, that has no flaws, and that doesn't work in the system. So it really becomes building that out. So I love that. I love smart horror. When we say that from the studio side, we're like, how do we do horror that says something, but also with all these films, why now? I like films that have that why now component. Why is this film needs to get made today? Normally it's addressing some political, some issue that we're currently dealing with, but in a smart way, in a fun way that subverts the message in the art, right? I always tell people, because I try to go to something that a lot of people have watched, like X-Men, right? it subverted people being different in a way that everybody could digest it and watch it in a way that it won. So I love sci-fi, smart horror. Those are the things that really bring me action that doesn't feel like everything we've seen, a million
Right.
times.
How you gonna do
How
that?
do you give a new way in? Love it. Yeah, those are really my things that I'm looking for.
You mentioned IP. So what's a way that somebody that's writing and looking to develop, how can they acquire IP? Can you talk about that a little bit?
So IP, generally speaking, popular IP is very difficult for obvious reasons. The studios also have story scouts. They know the books that are coming out in the next 2 years, right?
Right.
They're tracking it while they're in film before they hit the. So I went out to a book with Marseille called Amari and the Night Brothers. We landed it. It's a young Black woman-led Harry Potter, and we landed with Universal with Mandeville Pictures as well. That did Beauty and the Beast, Wonder, just a whole lot of movies and things. And then we also brought on Don. Then we also had Don Cheadle. So it was a fun thing that's still with Universal. That IP was going for 6-7 figures on the book festival market. So we all knew about it way before it came out. So everyone was asking for the PDF so we could all read the book before it even touches land, right? So for us, when it comes down to acquiring IP, you almost have to go to the bookstore and find stuff that people haven't touched, or things they haven't read, or books that you have read that people weren't really talking about. And what a lot of people are doing now, which is actually working, is they're going through their social media channels. They're back channeling them. Is this book available? They're finding ways to option material that allows them to make it. I'll say this as a whole. One of the issues that I have seen when it comes to these things, everybody wants to take like this biopic route. Biopics, I want to say, are the toughest thing to get made. It's so hard, especially when it still has to do with like slavery or things of the past, like that. The market of it now has become extremely almost like non-existent. So you almost got to find a new path into it, right? Which is getting Kugler to do it his way, that, like as a whole. So if you can do IP, back channel it, find out if the rights are available, figure it out. And I'll also say this. There's a lot of execs on our business. I probably shouldn't be saying there's a lot of execs. There's a professor that makes all this money. I think I forgot what school he's out of. All he does is write short stories. His short stories have been optioned by Rock Johnson's company, Ryan Gosling, like all these big names on just writing short stories that feel like it's fresh, new concept, has character arcs that are stimulating, and stuff that people feel like they could turn into a bigger property. So IP doesn't have to just be driven by books you're reading. It could be driven by you by actually creating a story that you close all those dots that people would ask without it.
So we need to start writing books. Is that what you're saying?
We've been needing them, especially with people of color. I would say it would be great to have more genre-based new ideas.
Okay, y'all. That's y'all get busy looking for stuff that I guess is not as popular, right? Because that's already handled by the studios. Look, either write your own.
Yeah. If that book's selling for a big price on that book market, or if that festival's going crazy on a book, every studio knows about it.
Okay. So try to find like the gems, that might have been looked over, or something that should have been a bestseller that didn't quite get it for whatever reason.
Yes, and some things, and I'll say, even look at some of these old books sometimes, because sometimes people forget to re-option them, or they forget, because the development process takes time. So some of these option deals only 12, 18 months, some of them. So like it's worth it to at least see if it's available, even if you think it might not be. I'm only giving it that more likely than not. If it's a big property, it's gone.
Man, are there some other projects that you've been part of that you would like to share? Just kind of like the development that was maybe a slightly different than the Little or the Black Love. Are there some projects in your past you would like to talk about?
I think, just generally speaking, I think the process is just the same. It's like trying to find, when you're talking to somebody, trying to find the nugget and the kernel in it that makes it feel like it's gonna stand out in the market and feel fresh and new, and something that you can pull from. I'll say this: I always push, me personally, when I'm talking to writers, I'm just very honest and transparent about the market as well. And the market wants great projects and stuff that feels different or have a unique perspective, right? White Lotus, it's a unique way into storytelling, and that's a TV show, right? But like, for me, it always starts with the idea. It always starts with the development. And sometimes it starts with the script. And I'm always like, okay, When I'm reading these scripts, is a formula. Is it big enough? Is it commercial enough? And that's stuff that I can just tell right off. So I'll say most of the projects take the same route for the most part. In regards to the financier piece of that, though, is typically there's already a script that's almost ready to go. There's already cast because like you have some of the agents, especially on the finance side, they already bring their talent into the script, and then it's just about raising money. So the only thing different about potentially where I last worked with Confluential was we were financiers. So instead of us having to always do all the blocking and tackling that we know we had to go to a studio first, we can make a decision that we're going to make this with or without the studio. We are the studio, so we'll make the decision to get it made, like we did with Fantasy Dancing and Young Wild Free that we did with Macro, right? Like those places were things that we made a decision to move forward on, with or without. That's the only difference in the process is the financing piece to the studio piece of it.
Oh, I see. So like by already having the funding there, then internally y'all can decide, okay, let's go ahead and move forward with this. Like you don't
We do
have
a
to.
purchase price for the script, buy the script, right, and keep it moving and bring on the director and get that thing moving really quick, because if we're making a decision with our own money, we can just go make it. I say the same thing when it comes to studio, because sometimes people want the studio to move so quick. I'm like, look, this is their money on the line. They're talking about 30 million plus on films. They're not about just seeing that made tomorrow because you say it's going to be great. It's like there's a lot of I's and T's that need to be crossed. So that's the same way it is as a financier as well. You're like, we're spending, even though it might only be 3 to 5 million, it's still 3 to 5 million, and you want to win big with it. But as we know, with how much indie films do actually get made, there's a lot of them. And if you go to festivals and so much, how much actually make money, and that's the thing that makes our business hard.
Man, is there a model out there where, because there's only so much space that you can have in an exhibitor, and when we went to the theater this past week, it was only like 7 or 8 screens. It wasn't that many screens where we went to, and so there's limited space there. And then even with those films, they're not in the theater that long. What is there a business model that works not going to theaters?
Yes, there definitely is. I'll say this, and no matter how many people think creatively or whatever they think about it, Tyler Perry actually has one of the smartest business models. Because his has always been independent, but his has always been made at a price. And it made it a price. And it's also being able to understand the culture enough to where he always have known where that dollar value would land. That's always made his projects profitable, right? So I always say this when it comes to a business model. The smartest business model is making it at a price, but having the biggest bang for your buck. Now, what Tyler can do, everybody else can't do. I want to make sure I point out, Tyler has now really created his space. At one point, Will Packer had a clear space, right? In the comedy space all the way through, especially working with Universal, and he still does. But the thing that makes it hard is our business has changed so much. There's so many talent with their own deals now. Kevin Hart got his own deal. Issa got her own deal. All the talent now, back in the day, there wasn't this many talent deals. So like all the comedy will go through one house. Now it's all over the place, and it makes it harder without those same level of A-list talent to make the Universal theatrical film, to your point. But is there a smaller version to make? Potentially, but when you start adding talent fees into it, these numbers come up really quick. But again, Tyler has a very specific brand that has been very successful. If anything, I give him a lot of applause for his business model. His business model is genius.
I can dig it. We have a question from Amaya again. Since U.S. and the Philippines are under the Berne Convention, I'm curious, what's the probability of Confluential taking in a first-time filmmaker Asian horror film? IP is secured in PH territory.
I'll say this goes for anything. I mean, and I'm not a Confluential no more, so I'm not going to speak for them specifically, but I think that as a whole, people will be open to it. Look, let me tell you something. We look for IP outside of this country all the time now. People are going to Korea, all over the place to find this unconventional IP because we need new ideas. Everybody, like that's literally why all this IP is being generated in other countries, and people want to bring that in here right now. So whether it's Confluential or a lot of these other places, there's a place for that for sure. Again, if it's a Asian horror film, love it. It's just what are you saying and how and again, what is a concept that feels so fresh but also speaks about why now? Again, there's a lot of good films in that space. So whether it's Asian or not, that's something that should be talked about.
Okay. There you go, Maya. We're closing in on the 5 minute mark. So are you doing more consulting when people are reaching out to you? Or do you want people to reach out to you? Like, kind of walk us through what's the proper way for people to reach to you on a professional level.
So generally speaking, because try to stay out of development no more, I do love consulting, and I do have, like I told you, I have a big production company client and a few others. I'm able to sell through the system in a real way. What consulting allows me to do is really be able to help people examine their script development, their process, and where it makes sense. I connect the dots with the studios. I have the friends, but I also don't water down my name. Meaning, this project needs to be at a level that is not just because you think it should land here, what I know it takes to be able to get a film through the through the system. So I consult on all levels: script development, processes, the studios that make sense, mandates, right, making sure that there's stuff aligned with who they're trying to sell to. So I do a lot of consulting now. I only do it now because, again, it takes a lot of time and energy to read scripts and to develop and go through the process of what it looks like, and to make sure that people understand the notes and everything that's associated with it. So I do that across the board with pretty much everything I've talked about today, in creating the best path forward for anyone that wants to, you know, are serious about really, like, getting in the system. But again, it's all the pre-work ahead of time for it. So, by the way, I just had a client sell a script to Netflix.
Let's go.
Literally, yeah, yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. In a writer room, first time writer. She was a talent though too. First time
What?
writer in there, and she's currently writing it for Netflix, and it's a fun commercial script. So yeah, big win. First time writer, not WGA, not
Wow.
wasn't in the system, and ultimately now have a huge opportunity as they want to rush and hopefully make her film in the next 3 months. And it just commenced, what, a month ago, about a month ago. So it's been crazy.
Wow. Congratulations on that, man.
Yeah, I'm
Um,
so happy for her.
Man, that's inspiration to everybody that's listening. Anything can happen. Consultant. So
Especially
how
if you
did
have a commercial idea. I love when they have commercial
commercial?
ideas. I know where it can land. Commercial, please.
Okay. Um, so do they email you? How do they reach you?
They can email me.
The email. What's your email?
They can put Prince, Prince, which is my first name. My last name is Baggett, Baggett at yahoo.com.
Okay, y'all reach out and he'll discuss prices and how that work
Yeah, yeah,
with
yeah, yeah,
y'all
yeah,
offline.
yeah.
If anybody else has any more questions, please drop those in the comments because we're going to be coming to a close here in a little bit.
Yeah, this
What
has
are
been great. It's been a fun combo.
Yeah, man, I appreciate it, man. Glad to be introduced to you. Thank you, AD, for the introduction. And man, it's inspirational listening to all the things you've done and being behind the scenes. I didn't even know, I don't even know Prince existed. This is
It
like,
well, it's so crazy because, like, a lot of us execs in business, we're all in the same groups too. So like we talk all, like we get together all the time, and whether it's someone that ran Netflix from before, or that ran Kevin Hart's company, and or that runs Eats company, we're all friends. Like, we're all Jordan Peele's, right? We're all very, very much tight because we all, we all go through the same thing and trying to figure out, what's next, and the changes in our ever evolving business and how we could, work together. So it's been really cool.
yeah, man, absolutely. That's cool to know that y'all like stick together like that.
We do.
Keep each other inspired. I remember Ava DuVernay on one of her interviews. She was talking about, man, every time I go to the coffee shop, I see Ryan Coogler writing something. And
Yeah.
because she said she don't like writing, so he's always writing something. And who knows, he in that coffee shop writing tenors. Fast forward a few years later, it's crazy.
Yeah, just crushing across the board.
All right, y'all, we're coming to a wrap again. Y'all go to grindovermatter.org and donate, figure out how y'all want to work with us because we want to keep workshops like this. We want to keep it free, keep it going, getting that grant money so that we can keep that for people that are interested in this industry. Prince, thank you for your time.
Thank you so much.
Yes, sir. And to your continued success, man. We'll catch you later.
Talk soon. Thank you.
No problem. You have a good one.
You too.